All right, I see it's almost 18 hours on the dot. I'm not sure if people can hear me.
Yes, we're getting you.
Okay, great, thank you. So I am going to share my screen and then we will start. Just give me a second. So just to mention that, I'm not sure if either one of us, myself or Pierre, mentioned this in the previous email communication, but we are wrapping up the so-called interactions. Ideally, virtual residential school is supposed to come to an end on the, is it on the, oh my goodness, on the 31st actually. So the plan today is we were meant to wrap up module number 6, but Piela had reached out to me to tell me to say the practical component of, because we're supposed to use Koha, a Koha walkthrough to showcase some core aspects associated with so-called integrated library management system. Oh, sorry, my microphone was muted, which is weird here. So I was saying, I was talking about the walkthrough. I'm not sure if Piela is going to, if he's going to, the screencast is going to prepare, if he's going to include installation and configuration of Core. But I guess you mentioned that once he covers his part of module number 6. But something else that we plan to do today is to have a very short epilogue interaction where we get to highlight some of the key things associated with the course. So things that you should expect in the exam, for instance. Right, so I'll get on with my part of the module. I'm just going to quickly gloss over this idea of integrated library management systems. Now, this module is loosely supposed to be centered around library automation. But what we've done is we've modified it slightly so that we focus more on so-called integrated library management system. And in fact, the original plan was for us to have 2 or 3 case studies of the most popular open source integrated library management systems. But alas, because of timing constraints, we're just going to have one case study, which is Koha, the popular Koha. Great. But before we start, I'm not sure if people have any specific concerns or questions. There's a reminder that there's 2 open assignments. There's assignment number 1 and assignment number 2. Assignment number 1 is due on the 7th, which is Friday. Assignment number 2 is due, I think it's due next week or something. Is it after today is Sunday, so it's due next week. And then also we have a test on the 7th, which is Friday. We did mention that the test is going to be open. We normally open it either, so we open it for, we either make it open within a 24-hour window period or a 12-hour window period. So you get to choose exactly what time you want to attempt the test. And the idea behind that is we are cautious of the fact that some of you might not necessarily have power or something where you are located, right? And so the idea is to give you an opportunity to write the test when it is convenient for you. Any concerns regarding the quiz, the assignment and the upcoming test? No, okay. Okay. I heard someone sighing. I don't know if they wanted to say something, but.
I was about to say something, yes.
Well, yeah.
I think it's just a concern on assignment number 2.
Okay.
The question and the the examples in the screencast and in the notes that have been uploaded, I think it's quite difficult to follow.
Which is this concern shared by everybody, or is it just Miss Messi who is
I don't know,
having challenges?
I'm speaking for myself.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so for example, I've been trying to look through the screencast and the notes. I can't find where there are clear instructions on how you place an image on another image. So
Placing an image on another image.
something like that, yes.
No, but there's no such. What sort of scenario do you want to place an image on another image?
There's an assignment that has
Which part? I've just beamed up the assignment. Which part requires you to
there where
put
there's
an
the
image on an
header.
image?
Where there's the header, there's also
Here.
that bookstore logo, yes. For example, this bookstore logo, which is also uploaded in form of an image. I don't seem to find any notes to show like exactly how you should do it.
Yeah, but if you use CSS, I don't know if this is part of the question. You could have a background image and place an image on top of that background image.
Okay.
Are these, well, anyway, Piela, do you have a comment? No, maybe Piela has probably gave away the answer or something. I'm not sure if Piela wanted to. Piela, are you there? We're not here. This is interesting. Yeah, so you want to look up in CSS, right? You want to look up this, Miss Madame. Yep. Probably given away the answer or something, but I've just pasted something in the chat. This is likely what you need to do. That's one option. And the beauty with, you probably figured this out by now, the beauty with these things like SQL type problems and HTML, you find that there's no one true solution, right? So there's different ways of approaching the problem. You could potentially come up with a solution that involves using CSS. Have somebody else want come up with a solution that involves CSS, I don't know. But my immediate intuition was that you'd have the main image. So this thing here, this thing here would be a background image, this, and then the icon would be placed here, on top of the background image. Have you not seen this? There are sites, I'm sure, that you've. Let's try and check the.
I tried to look it up, but probably I was trying to look it up using the wrong search terms. Maybe that's why I couldn't get exactly what I'm looking for.
I see. That's fine. I was trying to see if this is if the UNZA site is also uploaded as. Probably not, as a background image. I don't think so. Probably. I was trying to find a site that allows you to. Yeah. So, but it's essentially what you want to do is just you can add the main image as a background image, and then you have layers on top of that background image. Essentially, I don't know how you're designing your site, but you could apply the style, right? The header could be defined with a style that has this as a background image.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
that's what I did.
Any other concerns? Okay, yeah. If anybody gets stuck and you have concerns, please reach out to myself and Piela. Okay, any other concerns or questions, comments, complaints, contributions? So Piela says there's an issue with his microphone at the moment. He's sorting it out. Any other concerns, contributions, complaints, questions? I don't know what else. Or greetings. Okay. So we'll start then. So my part is just going to be ideally the focus is really going to be on CMSs, and I think it's going to be a repeat of what PLR did. I don't know if PLR touched a lot on CMSs, but it turns out that for us to set the stage for discussion of integrated library management systems, we need to reintroduce this whole idea or concept of content management systems, because it turns out that the vast majority of these integrated library management systems or integrated library systems are nothing more than content management systems, right? They're database-driven applications. But anyway, so start with a brief introduction and then just look at content management systems. And then there's a brief discussion of some of the key traits associated with integrated library management systems. And then we'll switch over to PLR, who will begin a gentle introduction to Koha, essentially. Now, this is the thing here. We must not lose focus of what exactly it is we are studying. In everything, in all that we've been doing, if you think about it, everything we've been doing is centered around these 5 key aspects of information systems. Specifically, in our case, it's computer-based information systems. This idea, or this notion of computer-based information systems was introduced to us in module number 1. Everything we've done so far, down for the HTML that you've been looking at with PLR, for instance, could be looked at or could fall under the software component. Why? Because what you were learning to do is to, insofar as HTML is concerned, is to build components, user interface components or features, right? Buttons, text areas, text fields, those different components collectively will make up an interface, a web-based interface, piece of software, right? In module number 1, we mentioned that hardware is a crucial ingredient to these things we're calling computer-based information systems. Without hardware, I mean, really, the computer-based information system is nothing, right? Virtually non-existent. Communications infrastructure, right? You need, in most instances, you need a computer network for you to be able to effectively make use of a computer-based information system. Why? Because fundamentally what you tend to do is, or what you tend to have is a sort of scenario situation where you have multiple users accessing the same type of computer-based information system, accessing data that is processed or collected by the computer-based information system. So you need some sort of communications infrastructure. This doesn't necessarily have to be a communications infrastructure that enables you to connect to the internet, but at the very least, it must be a sort of infrastructure that manifests itself in the form of the local area network. And then in beginning module number 3 and number 4, we looked at a specific type of data source, a relational database management system. So what I'm trying to say is that this notion of a computer-based information system is crucial to understanding integrated library management systems. Why? Because integrated management systems are a form of computer-based information system. For you to deploy an integrated library management system like Koha, you need a server computer system, right? Piece of hardware. You need software in the form of operating system software, for instance, and the individual components that you need for you to be able to serve Koha. Koha is a web-based application, meaning that it needs a web server, something akin to what Kira introduced you to, is it Apache or something, right? All of those are software components, right? You need people to interact with the computer-based information system, people to fix issues and challenges that might arise as end users are using or interacting with the computer-based information system. And of course, more importantly, you need a set of processes and procedures, policies, to help guide exactly how people get to interact with the data and the information that is collected and processed by the computer-based information system, respectively, right? And obviously, something else we latched onto was this idea of the components, out of the 5 components, the specific individual components that comprise of the information technology infrastructure that we need for us to be able to deploy and use this computer-based information system, right? So the 4 layers on top: the hardware, software, the communications infrastructure, and the data sources. Great. So if we are to maybe just kind of formalize things insofar as integrated library management systems are concerned here, it turns out that you need such tools for you to automate, in this case, certain processes that go on in library environment, right? So this automation process will fundamentally involve you setting up, configuring, and using an integrated library management system, right? So what you end up doing really is automating and integrating the different processes that might take place in your library environment, right? So these different processes encompass everything that goes on in the library environment, right? So acquisition, any form of cataloging that might be taking place, circulation and things of that nature. And the automation process is nothing more than an application of information and communication technologies in this library environment, and specifically to library operations and services. Right? These days, it's usually the case that, especially for certain services like cataloging, is usually the case that you typically need to have some sort of online public access catalog, right? I don't know if you've been introduced to OPAC in one of your courses, if not, maybe at 4th year or something. And so you immediately realize that in such instances, what you have is a set of integrated services, right? So your library management system, the integrated library management system, is no longer operating in isolation, but rather is interfaced with external services. Although this is not necessarily a strict requirement per se, but increasingly in this day and age is becoming a very crucial component of library automation. It's rarely the case that you'd have a sophisticated library environment where you just have an application that operates on a local area network. It's not the case, right? These days, at the bare minimum, you have this sort of situation. So if you go to the library section of the University of Zambia, you have a broad range of services integrated together, right? So using this interface, I guess we can call this a library portal for the University of Zambia, I gain access to the catalog, right? So I don't necessarily have to be on the UNZA network. By the way, I'm at home right now, far away from the UNZA network. So I can access oh my goodness, I don't know what's happening to Koha today. But I can access Koha, right, from a completely different network or via the internet. This is a very basic and rudimentary way of setting up an integrated service. But there's there's links to various important services, right? Key thing here is that you'd be integrating the various services within one user interface. All right, so again, just to reiterate here, the range of services that you'd end up automating, the regular processes that go on in a typical library environment, like I said, so acquisition, cataloging, issues to do with indexing and abstracting, circulation, serials management, referencing, right? And again, this last point is an important point. These days, it's very common to have a library environment which is integrated with remote services. So meaning that you need to ensure that your communications infrastructure facilitates access to remote computer systems on the internet out there. So again, back to the UNZA example, for us to gain access to journals that the UNZA subscribes to, we need to ensure that the UNZA network sort of like accessible via the internet, right? So those services are integrated within the UNZA environment. All right, so to just set the stage for a discussion of integrated library management system, I thought we'd start by understanding. I'm not sure if Pierre introduced this. I don't know if Pierre is online now. Did we talk about how data is exchanged on local area networks? Pierre doesn't have to answer. Anybody? Did you look at what happens, or did you discuss the so-called client-server architecture? I don't know if you did this in module number 1 or if you did this with Pierre. No, nobody wants to answer. Okay. So it turns out that your average integrated library management system or integrated library system is internet-based and it's web-enabled, right? So what this means is that it's implemented using the technology stack that was introduced to you in module number 5. You typically have programmers write server-side code, and then front-end developers develop some sort of sophisticated user interface and then combine those two different entities together to come up with a web-based system, which in this case we're referring to as an integrated library management system, right? So it's the average LIS is web-based, it's internet-enabled, and for it to function effectively, it leverages a so-called client-server model, client-server architecture, where you have various clients making requests to a server that is housing the web-based application, right, with details of what sort of resource they're interested in. So depending on the request being sent through to the server will respond by either sending back the resource that the client is requesting or an error message if the resource doesn't exist, right? So client sends a request, server sends back a response in the form of a resource or an error message. And this makes sense, right? If you look at it from the perspective of what you are doing in module number 5. You have an application that is database driven, right? It's web enabled or it's internet enabled. You deploy it. As users are accessing it, for them to gain access to whatever it is they want, maybe it's a home page, maybe it's the about us page or something, and it's dynamically generated. The request should be sent through to the server. The server, based on the URL that it receives, is able to figure out exactly what sort of resource the client wants. If the resource requires that information be pulled from the database, then content is going to be dynamically generated by pulling out information, in this case, information from the database. And then the response will be sent back in the form of meaningful information that the user is able to understand. So a very superficial overview of what typically happens here, right? Client sends through a request, the server processes the request, and then sends back the response. Of course, the mechanism of what goes on in the background is not as simplistic as we're making it seem here, right? We're abstracting the gory details. We know that behind the scenes, there are SQL queries that are being issued to the database, right? Information being sent back to the server-side scripts, right? Of the service that runs on the server side. And then the response, once information is correctly assembled, it's sent back to the user in the form of a response. So client-server request, ideally. And it turns out that this, alongside the technology stack that was introduced to you, is a basis for so-called content management systems. These are nothing more than database web-driven applications that fundamentally are used to create, store, edit, transform, and publish digital content. Now, for those of you that have been paying attention, especially during module number 3 and number 4, you notice that there are some of these functions here, right? Some of these functions here that can be mapped onto what myself and Piela introduced you to as being CRUD operations, right? So fundamentally, when you're working with such applications, all you're doing really, as you're interacting with digital content, is you're either creating new content, right? See, you are reading new content, or you're querying for information that already exists. You are updating information in case you want to make changes, right? And then you're getting rid of information, you're removing information, deleting, right? So CRUD operations. So you notice that these core functions of the CMS can easily be mapped onto, somebody wants to get in here, can easily be mapped onto so-called CRUD operations. Right, so obviously CMSs are referred to as database-driven web applications because the data that is published by CMSs is fundamentally stored in databases. And traditionally, these have mostly been relational database management systems, although increasingly now document-based database management systems are also being used. And so they're dynamic in nature because information is generated on the fly. So this is unlike what you guys are doing in the assignment, where you're literally just assembling static web pages to come up with that website, right? But with dynamic content, the content that is published on the front end is dynamically pulled from a database, right? Or from a dynamic source. It could be a flat file, but traditionally it's a database. And then constructed into HTML that is then served to the user. So the generation of the data, the dynamic content, is dependent on the request that is being issued by the user. And it turns out that these CMSs have actually wide applications. And this explains why they've become so instrumental, so crucial, right? In the 21st century, at least. There are, broadly speaking, two types of CMSs. So you tend to have generic CMSs, which are typically used to deploy websites. And then you have specialized CMSs that are used in specific domains. And this is where we get to introduce integrated library management systems, right? They are more specialized. They're a form of CMS. They're a form of CMS, but they're specifically meant to be used in a library environment. People would laugh at you if you decided to download Koha and say you're going to implement a website using Koha. I mean, you would, right? But it would be pointless because it turns out that it's meant for a specific type of use case, right? Right, so some random examples. Something tells me we've looked at this. Did we look at this in module number 1? Content management systems. Or was it 5310? I wonder. I'm gonna pause here. Nobody wants to answer. Could somebody tell me whether or not we looked at some of these things in module number 1?
Not that I can remember.
Okay, I see, right. Well, I suppose, I don't know if one data point is good enough for us to deduce that, or to ascertain that we didn't look at this. But some random examples of these CMSs, and this is where I guess I should say this, right? Let me, before we continue, I don't know if Pierre told you this, but in 2020, no one does what you're doing right now, right? Building a website from scratch, like what you're doing right now. You don't do that. What people do is they will download content management systems, a specific type of content management system, install it, and then customize it, right? So it's rarely the case, actually. If at all there's anyone who does this, I'll find it strange. There has to be a really genuine case for someone to build, to handcraft a website from scratch, like a sophisticated website from scratch. What people do is they'll use generic CMSs that are specific to whatever problem they are wanting to address, right? So in case you're wondering, then why is Pierre telling us to build this website if people don't do this? For you to understand the fundamentals of web development, you need to learn exactly how CMSs are implemented. Effectively, what you're learning is how to implement a typical CMS. Used to examples, this happen to be tools that I have played around with in the past, but this list is by no means comprehensive. There's a ton of generic CMSs that are available out there. So if you wanted to, if somebody approached you and told you to say, can you set up a website for me? Or maybe at work you're told to say, we need to set up a website for the library, for instance, or for whatever department you work for. Don't build it from scratch. You'll be wasting your time and the organization's time. Instead, what you do is you do your research and identify the appropriate generic CMS to use. Right now, appropriateness could be linked to maybe the one that is most widely used by other people out there. It could be centered around, I guess, the learning curve associated with setting up and configuring the CMS. Right. Some random examples of websites, in this case, that are implemented using generic content management systems is our very own UNZA website. Our UNZA website is it's a Drupal-powered website, right? So it's implemented using Drupal. Of course, what the UNZA has done is they've done some extensive customization to make it look the way it looks. Lighton's personal blog, which this is a shameless plug here, I'm advertising my blog. I haven't updated in a while. It's powered by WordPress, right? WordPress happens to be one of the most widely used content management systems. Fundamentally because it's very easy to get started using WordPress, extremely easy. It's point and click actually, just next, 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 and then you're good to go, right? Both of these content management systems are powered by default, they are powered by MySQL in the backend, right? So MySQL or MariaDB, I guess in 2020, right? So they're database-driven applications. And everything that you see on these websites, right? So if you go to the UNZA website or if you go to Lighton's personal blog, every time you visit the website, content is dynamically generated. So if I click read more, this information is being pulled from the database. Or it's not the files, I don't know, depending on what sort of setup you have here. Somebody wants to get in. Oh, sorry, someone is saying the network is tripping. Is that the case for everybody else?
Actually, I just wanted to ask if you can hear me now, by any chance.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, all right.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah,
So Haggai,
the network is really bad.
Fine now, it's fine. But at first it
We
was
can
tripping.
also hardly hear you.
oh, but why didn't you tell me? Yeah, that's a bit weird. Let me just try and see if I can change to a different network. It's very unfortunate.
But it's fine now. I don't know with others.
Okay. Oh, so I shouldn't swap to a different network, then it's fine, right?
In my case.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, Wedson is saying, guys with cameras, kindly turn off. We can't focus here. It's a very strange comment, right? I'm wondering, I can focus myself with cameras on. In fact, we love cameras. I love cameras myself. But anyways, so I was trying to showcase the fact that data is dynamically generated, right? Same goes for Lighton's blog, right? Pow. I hope it comes up. Data is dynamically generated. Everything you see everything that you are going to see on this website, I think my connection is bad. It shouldn't take this long. Or maybe, I needed to my subscription. Okay, but database driven, right? The State House website, State House Zambia website. That's a CMS, right? Last time I checked, this was WordPress, right? What else? Some random examples here. So this is WordPress. Most of the websites that are being built or deployed by, I don't know if people are aware of the Smart Zambia Initiative or Smart Zambia Institute. They're setting up websites for various provinces. So Eastern Province Zambia website. I know there's a pattern. I haven't accessed this in a while, but there's a pattern. I don't know if it's easternprovince.gov, eastern.gov.zm or something. I don't know. But all of these things, anyway, these are all CMSs. I wish I could find Eastern Province. I don't know. Luapula Expo. Oh, there we go. Lua. This is they use a very weird naming convention, right? This is likely a CMS, right? How would we know what sort of CMS this is? And I know we have a bit of time here, but we can manage to think. Let's see if we can figure out what sort of CMS this is. WordPress. I don't know if you can see this thing here. WP-content themes. So this is WordPress, right? The power of CMSs. I guess what I'm trying to say here is, again, these days, because web applications or websites have become so sophisticated, it wouldn't make economic sense for you to build a website from scratch, right? You just download a CMS and then you deploy it. Okie doke. It turns out that some examples of specialized domains that also use specific types of CMSs include higher education institutions, right? So institutions of higher learning will typically use so-called learning management systems. And we have been interacting with one learning management system for years now. I think this is the third year we're doing this, so-called Astria. Astria, in case you're wondering, is nothing more than an open source learning management system called Canvas. So somebody out there just downloaded Canvas and then deployed it onto some cloud infrastructure. I think it runs off Amazon, right? And then you view it as Astria. The only thing they've done is just customize it so that the look and feel matches the branding associated with the University of Zambia. And I think Astria is down or something. I couldn't access it previously. Right? Other examples of learning management systems, which are CMSs, is Moodle, right? Moodle is currently used to administer courses that are offered under the regular mode of instruction, right? It's not different from Astria. It's one and the same thing. All you're doing is you're managing the processes and procedures in a particular environment. In this case, all you're doing is you're administering teaching and learning activities, right? There's nothing to this. And you notice this interface is nothing more than HTML. The data is dynamically pulled from a database, right? It's not different from Astria. One and the same. Everything is the same in life anyway, right? There's more though. There's other examples of learning management systems. Google Classroom, right? The UNZA happens to use Google Classroom as well. So if you look at Google Classroom, you notice that even though it looks somewhat different from Astria and Moodle, but the idea is the same. You use these two to make available assignments, to add resources, to communicate with students, right? It's one and the same thing, anyway. If you want, you can look up Sakai as well. Maybe I should showcase Sakai as well. By the way, all of these examples that we have, the vast majority of them at least, they are open source and freely available. So you can download these things and set them up yourself. And so if you're one of those people who's adventurous, what you can do is can do a bit of research and maybe just try and help out these low resource schools to set up learning management systems so that they're able to offer online teaching services to their students, right? So Sakai looks different from Moodle, from Astria, but the idea is the same. The concept is the same. You share resources, you communicate with students, you make available assignments, students submit assignments, right? Same thing. It's like a Toyota and I guess, I don't know, a Hyundai or something. They're all vehicles, right? Do the same thing. All right, so this is what I was saying. And then in the library environment, aside to what we're going to focus on, this breed of systems called digital library management systems, right? they're typically they're used as document archives. And so they're most commonly used in library environments to set up things like heritage collections. So if you go to the UNZA Special Collection, you notice that they have these really valuable artifacts that they keep there, right? Things that you can only view from the special collections. What people from the library can do is digitize those things and then make them digitally available online so that people don't no longer go and queue up in the special collection or something. For you to be able to do that, you need to make use of a specific type of content management system, right? Digital library systems. And again, there's a whole range of open source and freely available platforms that you can download, set up, configure, and use to set up whatever collections you might want. Institutions like the UNZA and other universities will use some of these platforms to set up document archive that are used to provide access to scholarly publications. So the capstone project reports that you're going to generate in 2014 next year, for instance, will be made publicly available on our subject repository, which incidentally is deployed using DSpace, right? So different ways, different types of content management systems. Some of these are domain specific, some of them are more specialized. On the other side of the spectrum, you have so-called wikis, right? So these are mostly used to deploy platforms that involve collaborative editing. So wikis, for instance, like Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia, in case you are not aware, makes use of the free and open source wiki platform called MediaWiki. Similar to Wikipedia, what you can do if you work for a large organization is you can download MediaWiki, which is a CMS, and set it up for your organization so that people around the organization can collaboratively edit, change content in one location. All right, so like I was saying, this is deployed using, this is powered by MediaWiki, right? Open source platform. I hope this is making sense, right? Hopefully. Now, it turns out that integrated library management systems are no different, right? They are also, the modern day integrated library management systems are fundamentally content management systems. The vast majority of them actually are web-enabled. They are web-based applications, meaning that you typically need a web browser for you to interact with them. Meaning that they would need to be deployed and accessed from within a local area network or a communications infrastructure like a local area network. If you have users that are not co-located, maybe users that are scattered within a large geographic area, then you'd have to make sure that that particular web application is perhaps accessible via the internet or accessible via some wide area network of sorts, right? So there's, again, a broad spectrum of such tools, OpenBiblio, the famous Koha, which is going to be used as a case study. There's tools such as ViewFind. You want to look up Backlight. These are all the same, right? Fundamentally, they are content management system. They are database driven. They are web enabled, and they facilitate the integration of external services or data. It turns out that there are certain key characteristics or key traits that are associated with integrated library management systems, right? So we're specifically making reference to these things here. Some of these traits might actually actually also manifest themselves in CMSs that are used in different types of domains, but we want to focus on characteristics of integrated library management systems. So first up is they're web enabled and they're database driven, meaning that the content is stored in some database management system. And the resource that is requested by the user is dynamically generated by pulling information from the database. So the information that is pulled from the database is dependent on what sort of request is coming in from the user. And the user would obviously need some application like a web browser for them to interact with this integrated library management system. Another important trait is that they tend to implement so-called interoperability protocols, fundamentally because it's usually the case that they would need to interact with external services. So for a system to be able to interact with external services, it needs to be able to understand the rules and procedures that it needs to follow for it to communicate with that external service. The rules are what we are calling protocols or interoperability protocols. So your average integrated library management system will be incorporated with interoperability protocols. And there's a whole spectrum of interoperability protocols. So things like the famous OIPMH protocol, for instance, Open Archives Initiative protocol for data harvesting, protocols such as, I wonder if RDF qualifies to be called a protocol here, but Atom, protocols such as, now we are reaching here, we are classifying REST, for instance, as a protocol, right? All these different rules will make it possible for your average integrated library management system to be able to interact with external services. And this is important, right? It's important because for large organizations, like the UNZA, for instance, you would want this integrated library management system to coexist with already existing platforms. And for it to be able to coexist with these platforms, it needs to know exactly how to communicate with the other platforms, which is why protocols are important. The other important thing here is that the integrated library management system tend to be incorporated with core services that facilitate the discoverability of content that is stored in these integrated library management systems. And at a bare minimum, the discovery of this content is usually, almost always through searching and browsing. At a bare minimum, any integrated library management system will have a facility for searching for digital content and browsing. What you're doing is you're attempting to discover content, you're looking for content. And we see it here, right? Searching, search button, browsing, these quick links, well, perhaps not these quick links here, but there's browsing services as well. I don't know if you can see this viewfind screen here, but the browsing I'm referring to here is this panel here, right? So faceted browsing, faceted search, these are all important important services associated with integrated library management systems. Depending on how you want to look at things, I guess you could also lump in a very user-friendly interface, right? Because remember, the average person that gets to interact with this platform is a novice, right? So you want to make sure that the interface is aesthetically pleasing. It's appropriately designed, right? Designed in such a way that users are able to find exactly what it is they want. And then, of course, there are other auxiliary services that will enable people to be able to interact with the platform on the back end, right? So you'd have to log in with administrative privileges, for instance. All right, I'm just going to hand over to Piela, unless if there are any specific questions with regards to what we just looked at. I do hope, my hope here is that some of you, or if not most of you, if not everybody, is going to go out there and try and experiment with some of these tools that I spoke about. Any questions? I'm wondering if I'm even online now. It's so quiet on the Google
You are
Meet.
online.
You're online, so we can get you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. So there are no questions. Okay, that's good. I'm happy. Again, no one does what you're doing in assignment number 2, where you spend weeks writing, developing a website. You don't do that anymore, unless if you have time to waste. But it's good if you're trying to teach yourself how to do these things, because for you to get to a stage where you can modify and customize WordPress, customize it so that it looks like this. WordPress out of the box does not look like this, right? You notice that I customized it to look like this. Like this. The people behind the the people that are, I guess, it's Smart Zambia Institute or something, the people setting up these websites, they customized WordPress to look like this. And the customization is just branding information. Oh, the logo, the color for Zambia or something, right? I don't know if ministries have colors, but I thought this was the Minister of General Education, but it's somebody else. The colors are different or something, right? It's all about customization. For you to learn how to customize, you need to learn how to write HTML code, which is why we're doing assignment number 2. Great. Piela, I guess I'll hand over to you. It appears people have no questions with my part of the presentation, which I guess for me is a sign that everything was clear, right? I'll unshare my screen. Thanks. As we're waiting for Piela to set up, I mean, any random thoughts? Are we ready for the 7th of August?
Hello, can you hear me?
You're a bit faint, Piela. I don't know if your microphone has, I don't know, you probably want to adjust the volume.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you're faint. I don't know if it's just me.
No, he's faint actually.
Yeah.
Okay, one moment, let me just try and adjust.
Master S. Oswald, are you ready for the test on the 7th? Doesn't want to answer. Florence Mbozi, are you ready for the test?
We are not there, but we are going to write.
Yeah, but
We'll be ready by Friday.
Yeah, you have to, right? Are you one of the 5 who submitted assignment number 1? Have you submitted assignment number 1 yet?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Are you almost done with assignment number 2?
We have a lot, sir, but we are working on it.
What do you mean you have a lot? What's a lot?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry?
It's fine, Ms. Florence. We'll continue the conversation about a lot very, very soon. Let's hand over to Piela. Piela, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we're just going to briefly look at Koha, one of the integrated library systems. Okay. So if you can just confirm once again, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Sorry?
Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you at least. I don't know about the colleagues that are quiet.
I think though someone was trying to say something. I'm not sure.
Was trying to agree that we can hear you.
Okay, all right. So I think Lighton already mentioned towards the beginning, ideally, I would have liked to mention or discuss Koha in parallel with a practical example. Unfortunately, the practical example is not yet ready, but the idea is a practical demonstration will still be in a brief, short video, hopefully very, very short, right, which will be uploaded soon. For now, we're just going to discuss a bit of theory for Koha, which is one of the more commonly used integrated library systems. Right, and one of the first things which was noticeable about Koha is that it's free, so there is no cost for using your Koha. It's free and open source as well. Then you have the freedom to modify the product. All right, you have the freedom to modify Koha, all right, to suit your own needs. Okay, just a bit of history. It was developed back in January 2000 in New Zealand by this Katipo Communications, and I believe they had there was also some other people that were working with them, but it's just a bit of history. Okay, and it is currently maintained by a dedicated team of software providers, right, and library technology staff from around the globe. Okay, so one of the things about Koha being free and open source, there's various different developers across the entire world who have access to making changes to the core Koha or providing input on the direction that Koha will take in the future. Okay, so I think we'll mention this a bit more as we go along. Okay, so here we just have some of the advantages of Koha. Okay, so it's proven and stable technologies. So Koha, it has been used for quite some time. It has been very stable, and it has also been very scalable. So it can work for a small setting where you need an integrated library system for a few users, and also when you need an integrated library system for a larger number of users. So that's the idea of scalability. Okay, and then we have software collaboration and resource sharing. All right, so in this particular case, it's also coming back to Koha being free, so it's also easier to adopt across the entire globe. And there are some libraries and multiple institutions that are already using Koha. So it's very flexible and very, it's very efficient for resource sharing because you already have other such scenarios or other institutes that are already using Koha. All right, and you have this long-term support, which it's still related to number 2 here. And as we also mentioned, it's user-driven, so it's open source. There's developers across the globe, right? So unlike some of these commercial softwares, maybe you have something like Microsoft SQL Server, where Microsoft is the one that's mainly in charge. All the decisions that concern it is based on Microsoft. Koha would be something of the opposite, whereby, yes, it does have a structure and a plan for how it's going to progress, but there are multiple different developers who are in charge of maintaining, all right, the progress of Koha. All right. And number 5, cost effective. As we mentioned, it is free. All right, so there are some other integrated library systems which are commercial. I think we will see some of the, we'll just have a small little demonstration, or rather there's just a small table which shows some of the features of the commercial systems versus the features of Koha, and you'll notice Koha actually offers the same things. So in that manner, it's very, very cost effective. You can do a lot with Koha, which even the commercial systems, they would just be similar, or in some cases, you might even have some that would be possibly less efficient than Koha. Right, and then there's innovation. Since Koha has the ability for developers to add their own improvements, right? So it allows for some creativity. If you have some more advanced developers who can modify Koha to suit their own needs, right? They can add some creativity to Koha. And then there's this low bandwidth connections. So Koha, it was designed, okay, so okay, what we mean with the low bandwidth connections is designed in such a way that it's supposed to be accommodating of even slower networks or areas where the network may not necessarily be the highest speed or the highest reliability. Koha, for example, we just to try and simplify it, would say something along the lines of it would not require a lot of data or a high-speed internet, something of that sort. Right, so that's your low bandwidth connections. Right, so again, we're just looking at a bit of a theory here for Koha. Can you hear me? Can anyone still hear me, just to confirm?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, so Koha, it is being used in more than 300 libraries across the globe. It's used in academic libraries, there's public libraries, right? You have schools, and there's also special libraries. As we have mentioned, there's a committed team of programmers. So again, the development, it is now maintained by a community of libraries collaborating across the globe. Within these libraries collaborating, there will be developers, right, who are maintaining the Koha project. So here we just have an example of a few libraries. We already mentioned there's over 300. So again, as we mentioned, it being tried and tested, right? You will already have 300 libraries or 300 institutes that can vouch for the use of Koha in cases where it has been working successfully. But here we just have a few that are named, right? So this Horo, I'm very sorry if I'm not pronouncing it properly, but this Horo Wenua Library Trust. Okay, so it's very interesting. At least the first one here, because I believe they were one of the first partners of this Katibo Communications. Yes, we mentioned it was initially developed in this New Zealand by this Katibo, and one of the first partners or one of the first group of developers that actually started adding to Koha were from this library trust. Okay, so yes, there's a public library that is using Koha, and then here we have some academic libraries that are using Koha and some other public libraries. So again, they are more than 300. These are just a very short synopsis or case of users of Koha. So here we just have a bit of a comparison. We have Koha and some of the commercial library management systems or your integrated library systems. Okay, so here on the first
Sorry,
column,
Paul.
yes.
I thought I'll just mention something really important, that the UNZA recently, and by recently, I think, is it last year or year before last, they recently transitioned from a commercial version of an integrated library management system. I think they used to call it Unicorn, they called it. And I'm not sure if Unicorn is like a trademark name, but they transitioned to using Koha. So what I'm trying to say is the previous slide, UNZA is on the list of the 300 plus users. Zikas is on the list.
University.
Oh, thank you. There we go. So Koha is all over the
Yes.
top. Thank you.
So here we just had a bit of a comparison. Some of the features that would be normally expected in your library, the feature of acquisition, cataloging, circulation, and then here you have this OPAC. Also, we will briefly just mention OPAC as we go along. And then the serials, or also known as serial management, biblio format, and then standards. So here it's whereby your system is following some of the global standards. All right. And then, all right, so the last one's not a service, but it's just part of the comparison. So here we have this commercial library management systems, not to say anything wrong with them. We just wanted to compare. We had LIS, Libsys, VT, LS, and Libsuit. And you can see they all have these same services. But Koha equally has these same services as well. And yet Koha, when it comes to pricing, would be free and open source, whereas the others, you have a situation whereby in most cases, you'd be paying some form of an annual subscription or an annual licensing fee. All right, so Koha, it is OS independent. All right, you can access it on any operating system. However, we will mention it is recommended that you use Linux. So you can get it to run on Linux, Unix, Mac, and even on a Windows. However, the way that you set it up for these different systems will vary, right? So I believe in our demonstration, we will try with Windows, right? So Windows had a situation whereby it has its own setup, which is different from how you do it on the other systems. Okay, and we will look into that at a later time. It is a web-based. Lighton already mentioned you have these content management systems. A lot of them are web-based, and even the integrated library systems. A lot of them are web-based. Koha is web-based, so the goodness is, as long as you have access to a browser, you can access your Koha. You don't need some other, apart from when you're setting it up, right? If you are running a Koha server, right, you wouldn't need any specialized hardware or any specialized programs, right? And then there's full Mark 21 support for professional cataloging. So your Mark 21, this is one of the global standards, right? And it is not the only one. There are other standards which your Koha will support and it will be in compliance with. And then Koha is multilingual. So it has the language support built into it since it has been used globally, right? So it's not just available for example, in English. You will also have Koha Chinese if you wanted an integrated library system that is in Chinese. Okay, so another thing about Koha, it is customizable. So even though it has this standards compliance, right, you can customize it somewhat. So we have this OPAC, which is your open access public cataloging. We'll not get into too much detail on that for now, right? But we will just mention that it is customizable, right? And again, it has most of the core services that you would expect in your integrated library systems. You have full cataloging, circulation, acquisitions, and then you have your library stock management, your inventory management, and then you also have your patent management, or your patron management, right? Those are the people that will be using your library system. All right, so it also relies on some of the major database types which are already in wide use. So those who are familiar with these database types or these database systems, right, it's easier for them if they're planning to develop for Koha or just to have a better understanding of Koha. So it can work on a text-based database system. All right, so I believe that is now a NoSQL solution. We'll not get into too much on that, but you can use MySQL. So by default, I believe Koha will use MySQL. All right, and then there's what is known as serial management, barcode printing, the export and import of records. Again, we will not get into too much detail on these, but we're just mentioning some of the things that you can do with Koha. Okay, so I believe Lighton already spoke about your client-server architecture. Koha, it uses a client-server architecture. So the idea is you have one installation of Koha on the server. So Koha, it will be installed on a server that is using a Linux operating system, Unix operating system, Mac, or a Windows operating system, right? But again, we will point out it is recommended that you are using a Linux operating system. I believe when it was first designed, most likely the first operating system that I was working on was a Linux-based operating system. Although you can actually get Koha to run on any modern operating system. Now, after you have Koha installed on the server, then now you have the client workstations. So usually these will be machines on the same network, or it depends on how your integrated library system is set up. So now the clients will now just access the installed version of Koha through that web browsers. All right, so through the web browsers, they'll get this graphical based view of Koha. Okay, so we have a bit of just a little screenshot towards the end where you actually see some of the options that are available inside of your Koha installation when you are looking at it as a client. Okay, so your requirements if you are going to install Koha. All right, so there's this main website where if you want to just find out more about setting up Koha. So for example, I know with the Windows, what happens is you get a package where when you try to set it up, you can install everything in one go, everything else that is needed. But alternatively, you can install the things one by one. So in an opposite manner, I also know that on Linux, you can do it such that you can install each of the features one by one. I believe you have the option of both. You can run an installation for Koha, which in the background will actually just download or install Apache, MySQL, Perl, right? Or you can install them manually on your independently one at a time. You install Apache, you install MySQL, and then you install Perl. Okay, And then again here, we're just mentioning that it is recommended that you use Linux, but you can install your Koha server on almost any modern operating system. Okay. All right. So here we have mentioned this before. You just want to make sure you have the web server Apache, you have the programming language Perl, all right, and you have the database engine MySQL. All right, these three components installed on your system, and then there will be some additional Koha files, all right, which are from the official Koha page, all right.
So I don't know if it's fine if I can just chip in on the Perl thing. I want to latch on to what we discussed in module number 1. For those of you that still remember the screencast. The different type, when we're looking at computer software, we looked at the broad spectrum of the categories of software, right? One of those categories that we discussed were so-called language translators, if you remember. Now, under language translator, we mentioned that programming languages can either be compiled or interpreted. It turns out that the likes of Perl, PHP are interpreted languages. What that means is once you write your software, for a user to be able to run that piece of software, they need to install the interpreter. Otherwise, they won't be able to run it, right? It's unlike compiled languages where you download a .exe file and then you store it next. This is different. You need the interpreter installed, right? Which is why one of the requirements is Perl on the program. You need to make sure that you have Perl installed. Otherwise, it won't work. Just like PHP. Did we look at PHP PL? I don't know. But did we? I don't know if we did. Okay,
briefly.
Yeah, just like PHP, it's an interpreted language. For a user to be able to execute or run program instructions written in PHP, you need a PHP interpreter. I hope that makes sense anyway.
Okay, so again, just for some clarity, PHP, there is a few notes on that in the document that is module 5C, web and MySQL. So here we just mentioned the components that you want to be installed for your Koha server. And for your client, you just want to have a recent internet browser. So there was a particular point in time where you might be using a browser that might not be able to run some of the features for Koha. But in most cases now, if you're using a recent internet browser, it should work fine. So for example, you need something called JavaScript being enabled. So JavaScript is a programming language. It adds some functionality to certain web pages, a lot of web pages, in fact. But in most browsers now, you will actually have JavaScript being enabled by default. Okay, and then now the public interface for this OPAC, all right, it is in line with XHTML 1.0. And in this regard, it is compatible with most modern browsers. There may have been a time where there are some browsers that were not actually suitable for XHTML 1.0, but now most browsers which are using HTML5, which is actually, it came out after XHTML 1.0. So as long as your browser can understand these XHTML standards and has your JavaScript enabled, right, and maybe a few other things which most modern browsers do, the Koha clients should be able to use Koha just fine. Okay, so again, some of the features that Koha has, I believe, when we start to do a practical demonstration, we will look more into these. So you have here, again, this was your open access, all right, cataloging, right, and then we have the full catalog support, circulation, serial. So this is serial management, then acquisitions. So acquisitions, for example, this is whereby now your system, all right, it is tracking, or rather it actually manages when you have received books from a supplier, things of that sort. Patron management, so patrons, those are the now, all right, so I believe coming from your certain backgrounds, you're already familiar with most of these terminologies. So now that's mostly the people that will be using the library system. All right, then there's branch management, reservations. So this is just some of the features. We'll actually try and show Koha doing some of these or working with some of these features in a practical way. For now, we just have like a bit of a screenshot where some of those different areas are actually listed out as specific different links once your Koha is installed. So this is what a client would see, right, when they log into the Koha installation that is on a server that is on the same network. So you have your circulation, your patrons, things of that sort. Okay, but again, it depends on also what kind of access that your user has. So all of these options, right, they won't be available to everyone, but if you are, for example, the main administrator who's handling that Koha's installation on the server, you will be able to make changes to all these different features, things of that sort. So again, this is all that we'll have for now. All right, we will try to see a practical installation where you actually see these features. This is just a bit of a screenshot, which would be what you would see inside of a browser. So that's all for now, but there will be a video session, right, showcasing more on Koha. So I believe for now, I'll just handle back to Lighton.
All right. I'm sure people have questions or something. Don't know. Very strange.
Yes. If you have some questions for Koha or integrated library systems in general.
Okay. Wondering what the silence is all about. If there are no questions, then maybe I'll switch over to the other slides, Piela, and then we can do a bit of epilogue. Now, tempted, Pierre and myself will try and see if we can make ourselves available once we write the test in the week before the exams. We'll chat about this in the sidelines, and then we'll come up with days where you will be able to find us online. So we'll create, and we haven't spoken about this with Pierre, but we'll try and see if we can schedule slots where if you have a specific question that you need clarification on, that's a week before the exam, then we can try and address those issues you might have. More like I don't know if we can create a query session or something. I don't know, like a revision of sorts, right? So there'll be like a room that where you just log in, you'll find us, a Google Meet room. But I'm going to share my my slides again. I'm going to share my screen again so that I walk us through the first part of the epilogue class. Here's no questions. So someone has he's saying we would also like to have a view of how your questions are set. Well, you've already had a few in the assignment, number one, and then the other, I guess the other opportunity we will have is on Friday, because it turns out that Friday will have questions from all the modules. And we'll talk about this in the epilogue class just now, by the way, the idea that in as much as the questions in the test will be compulsory, but the questions in the exam are set up in such a way that traditionally you have two sections, section A and section B. Section A is compulsory, and then in section B, you get to choose which question you want to attempt. And the usual, I mean, I think they're used to this. But so I was answering Watson's question here. You have a few of our questions are going to be phrased on Friday, because the exam is going to have a mix of questions coming from the modules that were handled by Lighton and the portions that Pierre was handling. What you will notice is that the style, right? The way the questions are going to be phrased, and I guess what is being asked of you is going to be different. But also, if you think about this, the focus in the various modules was different, right? There are some courses that are more practical oriented. There are some modules rather that are more theoretical in nature, like module number 1, for instance, right? And to a certain extent, I guess module number 2, right? So the phrasing of the questions is going to be dependent on what sort of content was covered. But yeah, so we'll have Yeah, I don't know what Helen means by please go easy on us. I don't know. I shouldn't have laughed, but I just laughed because I thought, I don't know, I just laughed because I interpret that statement differently. Right? Go easy on us. Okay, we shall go easy on you, Miss Helen. Yeah, we shall go easy on you. Noted. All right. That was a joke though. The laugh. And then,
So just before you proceed,
yes.
what's the structure of the continuous assessment? I've forgotten.
Two assignments, one test.
So the test is out of 30?
Remind me again. Let's not speculate. We shall go on there's something on the Moodle, but I'll open up a document that I have here. I don't know if you have the distribution on hand, but I do believe I have this here. Just oh wow, it's not here. Module 4 notes. Is supposed to be this split here. I don't know if you can see this.
Yes, we can see.
Is it? I don't know if this is it 60-40 PL or it's 50-50? This PL is gone, I suppose. I don't know. Yeah, so it's
Can you come again? I didn't hear the question very well.
Oh yeah, so I was trying to find out. I see I just opened up the course syllabus, and I found a 60-40 split in the course syllabus. It's a 60-40 split, right? In this course.
Yes. So yes,
Yeah.
because I've seen also in the same syllabus. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope that answers your question, Miss Macy, Miss Madam. But
So
also
does it mean the test is gonna be 40 marks, or we'll write 2 tests?
no, it's one test, 30.
One test, 40 marks. If
30. No. So I said 60-40 split. 60% is a continuous assessment, 40% is the exam.
Well, I asked so because the assignments are out of 10 each. So I was asking with that understanding.
Oh yeah, so that's the out of 10 is just the marking, it's just the breakdown of the marks. I mean, it uses a weighted, each assignment has the same weighting. So because we're writing 2 assignments, each assignment is going to be out of 50. We're just going to scale up the 10 marks out of 50. So if you get 10 out of 10, you get 15. If you get 9 out of 10, you get 13.5 marks. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. Thank you.
I thought it did too. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, there we go. So we also discussed this in the very first interaction that we had. Yeah, a brilliant question. These are important questions to think about. This is a very nice course. You can pass the course before writing the exam, right? Life is easy. But yeah, it is, I think. But
No,
sorry?
it's not easy. You have to work for the marks. So nothing easy about that.
I thought that was the case for everything in life. I think you have to work for everything in life. Even eating, right? It's a struggle. I struggle myself. But so we continue with the epilogue. Unless there are any other nice questions to do with the marks, the breakdown and whatnot, maybe not. So the epilogue is meant to wrap up, to tie the different pieces together, formally wrap up things, right? This is what they do, I suppose, in all the courses. At least this is what we do.